Listen.
I've been hearing a lot lately about men don't talk, but in my experience, men do talk, just people aren't listening. So it's going to be me and a group of blokes discussing our struggles and victories through life. Warning, there may be some bad language, so apologies to all the moms, especially my own. Let's get going.
Listen.
I've been it's the Black Country Blokes, and the fact about everything that is mental health, disability, and life in general. Here with me, Kev Dillon, and my partner in crime, as always, Lee Cadman. Now we're joined by Luke, who's been on the show before from Wild and Well. He come on with Ask Mark, who's an off branch of the Black Country Women's Aid. So we've asked him to come back on to hear a little bit more of his story. So, Luke, thank you, brother, for coming on.
No worries. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to come back, to be fair. It was a really good conversation last time. So I'm quite excited to be here, and particularly going away, it was nice to see you folks, what you do and what you talk about. So, thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're going to start the show as we always do with our gratitude list. I had a great weekend. We went out for my wife's birthday and went to get her golf. I don't know if you've done it.
Great place a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we went to Digbeth, and great bunch of guys and girls. And I was walking down the road, and this doorman run over. Kev, I said, bloody hell's he? And he was a lad I used to teach years and years ago at Severs College, and he was come over, put his arms around me, and it was lovely seeing him. He'd all grown up now, but he'd lost one of his eyes through white collar boxing. You know, he hadn't got a treat, but it was nice having a catch up with him. It was great having a catch up, obviously, with my wife and my friends, and it was overall a great night. Talking about boxing, we've got an ex-boxer coming on next week, Kevin Macaulay, talking about being a journeyman, because, you know, Kev had over 200 bouts, and to come away with no brain damage, no eye surgery is remarkable. And people don't often talk about the journeyman. They talk about the world titles, but being a journeyman is no laughing matter, is he?
No, he's fought some absolute cracking up-and-comers as well. I was looking through his record. I think it's 250 bouts. Yeah,
251, I think.
Yeah, something like that. Ridiculous. Absolutely mad. But yeah, he's fought kind of the best of the best.
Yeah, and he was a local lad, so looking forward to that. What are you grateful for?
Well, on Thursday or Friday last week, we received my daughter's new buggy, so I was able to go out down Savage Carnival in it with her looking really comfortable. And really, I'm just grateful for the people who helped us in the fundraising to get it. Yeah, it's fantastic. All the people jumping on board again.
And she's got it now. She's got it. On Facebook. Yeah,
Nikki probably posted something on Facebook. Obviously, I don't use it, but yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. We can get her out. We can get her. It's quite fitting. Get her more outdoors.
Can you explain what the buggy's like, though?
Yeah, it's basically a 3-wheel buggy, and it's just a bigger sized. So obviously she's 8 years old now. So really, it's the same as any 3-wheel buggy. It's bigger size, massive wheels, massive tyres. They'll last into her adulthood as long as we look after it, which we will. But it means we can go outdoors, and you can go off the beaten path a bit more. I don't know whether anyone saw. I can't remember the rugby player's name, but there's a rugby player who's got MS, and someone ran with him in one of these buggies doing the London Marathon. And I think that shows how kind of hard wearing and how good they are. I can't remember the person's name now, the rugby player, or ex-rugby player.
What are you grateful for, bruv?
I mean, to be honest, last week we were told our dog unfortunately got like a tumour in his mouth.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where we had to take him back to the vet this week, and he was going to tell us whether it was going to be, you might have to put him down today towards that. But fortunately, we've heard that's not the case. Yes, he's got a tumour. It's not aggressive. It's not going to be super quick. So I'm just grateful that we, as a family, have got more time together with the dog, really. I mean, we've had him a good 10 years as a rescue. But yeah, for me, it's an interesting one, because I was out with him the other night, and I got a bit of water in the eye because I was walking him across the field, and he's always come out at me on my bushcrafting stuff when I've gone to practice and stuff like that. So he's quite connected with the stuff that I've done and what I do, sort of thing. So I'm grateful that we as a family are going to have more time with him, and he's going to be able to share a few more of those journeys with me. So yeah, I'm grateful that his life's a bit longer.
Animals, when we have our pets, they really do become part of the family, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, and they go, "Oh, it's only a bloody dog." I said, and you thinking, anyone who says that has never had a pet they truly loved, because I love my cat so much. It does me in Scylla Black, little black cat,
Yeah.
really noisy, but she's such a kind, lovely cat. You know, and my mother-in-law's just got a dog, a little sausage dog, and
Yeah.
they truly do fill the void with a lot of people, don't they? Especially if
Yeah.
that is the only family you've got as well. Like my,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? If you haven't had children, or you haven't got a partner, and just that little bit of company as you walk through the door is phenomenal, isn't it?
And I think that's the thing you get when you've got them. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Not just the great stuff, they annoy you like family as well.
Yeah,
They've
yeah.
got their own little personalities. That I used to have a dog, our other staffy. We had to put it down, old age, got sick, and the one thing that annoyed me about it was one thing I missed first was the constant licking sort of thing. She's got that staffy licking thing. And I think that's the thing they've got all these sides to their personality, and then but they're just there. And I know that, for example, our dog Ted is really good with my daughter Neil, and he lies on her and strokes him and stuff like that. And that's your standard everyday sort of thing. But for people as well who want connection, pets are really good for that. I mean, dogs and cats in particular, we've kind of domesticated to us, haven't they? So I think it's, I don't think you shouldn't doubt the power of a pet and what it means to somebody. They're really important.
My friend once said that to me, because just treat yourself like your pet. And what do you mean, treat myself like my pet? Because, you know, when your cat's poorly, won't you? Because you take it to the vet, don't you? And of course, when it's hungry, you feed it. When it needs a bit of love, you give it love. When you're hungry, but you go about your meals, or when you're poorly, you don't always go to the doctors. And when was that time you give yourself a bit of affection, a bit of love? You're bloody right.
I think, that's quite an interesting thing, actually, because we don't always give ourselves love. I worked with, years ago, I was doing some counselling in school, and one of I think she was only about 15-year-old, 16-year-old, coming to the end of her school or GCSEs, really low on herself. But she was, she worked with horses, and she had her own horse. And we used to, sometimes in therapy, they'll say almost like look in front of the mirror, say positive things. So not everyone can look in front of the mirror. It's not, that's not where they're at. But one thing that she always come across to me with her was that she liked the horse. The horse was really good, and she found a lot of comfort in stroking the horse. And he got equine therapies. So that's how much a horse can be. And I said to her, it wasn't my idea, it was my supervisor's idea. And he says, well, get her to look in the eye of the horse. What does the horse see? And she went away after that, and she come back in the next day. She says, no, I did do that. I looked at the horse, and the horse looking at me. And for me, she says it was nice because I felt like the horse liked me for who I am. There was no question. There was no judgment. Every time I'm grooming the horse, I'm riding the horse, it's just a nice, she didn't use the word connection, but that's the sense that I'm getting now. But and that was powerful for her, coming back and saying, I looked in the eye of the horse and I saw myself through the horse instead, and what I offer. So I think now pets are, there's a lot to them, and you notice them when they've gone. And I was saying to my daughter, our daughter's 7, and she's always been around dogs now. And she's got over, the death of one dog, and now she'll be faced with the other. Don't hide it from her. And we always say to her, it's about remembering those moments. We have pets. We have a lot of pets throughout our life. And, just because you get a new one, you don't replace the old one, but you will feel those pains and those sorrows. But you feel the pain and sorrow because you've had so much joy. And you know what you're losing. You can't get that back. So we've got to appreciate it while it's here as well. And
that's it. Once again, I'll be saying, grief is the price we pay for loving someone, but it's a price we pay a million times, because you should miss someone when they've gone. You should miss that animal. It's only a good holiday if you had to come home. And it's the saying, it's the saying goodbye to the holiday, to the pet. And you're saying, because I've loved it. I've loved this experience, and I don't want it to end.
And the thing is, and I think that's the same. And we appreciate things in some ways, I guess, because they do end, don't they? We appreciate that in life things are finite. And if we're very unlucky, that catches us off guard sometimes. if we're lucky and we're present, we're always aware of it. So if I go back to like our dog Molly, that was my dog that me and my wife first got when we moved in together. And I remember every night with that dog, I really loved Molly, and I really loved Ted as well. I used to go to bed, and before I went to bed, I'd hug her, and I'd really, but not just hug, it was a real feel, you know, when you do your family sort of thing. Because for me, you never know when that time is gone. And I remember before my nan died a few years ago, I think died in 2018, as morbid as it sounds, noting that she's getting older, I really, each time I hugged her for the last time, I made sure it was like, I always thought this could be the last time. So I really took a lot from that hug. And I've tried to kind of take that into life in general now, like with friends, with family, you know, close, distant. Because I think the reality is if we're going to be happy, it's better to live in the moment. It's better to think. I remember reading a book, I think it was Tibetan Book of the Dead, and they were talking about, like in England, like death, for example, is a taboo subject. Yet it shouldn't be. And I was in the office once, and we were talking about, you know, who would you want? This grim disagreement topic, but who would you want to die first out of you and your partner? I didn't know how it would come up, and I went, I'd say I'd want this sounds horrible, I said I'd want my partner to die first. And she went, that sounds, why, that's horrible. I went, because I'd rather deal with the pain of loss. If we're both old and we've reached the end of our life, I'd much rather take on the pain of loss. And then one of the people said, I just don't talk about this. And it kind of got me thinking that at that point, is that we really do shut down when we think about death, because we don't kind of want to acknowledge it, especially when we're young and life seems so far ahead of us. But, you know, I've had to doing the job I do, death comes a lot. It comes up a lot.
And it needs to be talked about. We had some wonderful people on the show about talking about death, like, you know, with your mom or your dad or your gran. So where do you want to be buried or cremated? Or, you know, once the pain gets too bad, do you want to still be in the fight? Some people are fighting to the very death. Some people go, you know what, as soon as the quality of my life's gone, but you need those conversations. And you can't just put a pillow over my head. No, because who wants to put their loved ones in that situation? You know, it's breaking the law, but we need conversations about it. And what you said about you'd want her to go first because she hasn't got to suffer. We had a great guy on, I forgot his name, and it was he was saying that, he goes, if a man dies first of a certain age, the woman often lives for years because she survives for her children and her grandchildren. A man normally dies fairly soon after because he's just thrown in the towel. I can't live with a heartbreak.
And that's an interesting one as well, isn't it? So you talk about like the difference between men and women and emotional resilience and stuff like that. It's going into some of the science behind it, but typically, it's my own personal experience, and typically women just spend a lot better talking about things and being open about things. I think men are getting better, and I don't think it's necessarily as bad as it was. I mean, I've got a section of my friends that, you know, there's one chap that when we go out, it is really deep conversation. We're trying to kind of work things out in our heads. We've both got kind of our own anxieties, so we're very open and honest about that. And I think to talk about it's important. I mean, you go back to the death thing, is that being outdoors, you see it a lot though. That's an interesting one. If you're outside, you're going to come across death. As much as you're going to come across life, you're going to come across death. And I've known on a couple of occasions, but I think it was March this year, we came across a dead magpie. It was just unfortunate.
They're bloody everywhere nowadays, isn't they?
Yeah, oh God, yeah. There's unfortunately they're causing.
Not soon if they keep dying, Kev.
Yeah, well, they keep on dropping out of the sky, but yeah, but it was an interesting one because the kids found the magpie. It was just really sad, and in the end, and that's what I quite like about kind of being a bit more open, a bit more child-led, client-led, and stuff like that. Is they wanted to bury the bird, and the whole session, 2 hours spent on this bird. Okay, so how do you think he might have died? Okay, what could have caused it? Is it natural? Was it a predator? It doesn't look like a predator because it's not broken up, so it could be disease because nothing's eating it. Okay, what should we do with the bird? We should bury the bird. Okay. Well, let's name it first. So we're going through the whole process of what happened to this bird? Let's name this bird. So it's Buzzardbird. What's it called? It could have been Bertie Bird. I might be getting that wrong, but and they named the bird, and then I dug the hole and we put the bird in it. And then once we buried the bird, we then went back, and I had a load of craft materials, and they made like little like flagstones and stuff like that for the grave to put in this bird. And it was a really kind of powerful one, because I know one of the young people I was working with was crying after, and it was interesting because it wasn't necessarily about death that he was crying about. He was crying about relationships and the relationships that he'd had and lost. The people are still alive, but he'd still lost them. So a lot of talking about the bird, death and loss led to other things as well. And I think particularly when you're outdoors, there's a lot of those kind of death comes around a lot. If you're outside, you're going to see death. You're going to step on a snail, it's death. So you are confronted with it, but then you get the opportunity, particularly with the younger ones, to kind of talk about it in a different way. It can be quite powerful, to be fair.
And it's so natural. Life, birth, death, they all go in hand, don't they? But it's something like, don't talk about it because you'll upset them, but they've got to be upset. I'm not saying like you haven't got to go into graphic details necessarily how people have died or how they've suffered or how it was, but it's where religion can take its part, they've gone to heaven. Whatever it is, it hasn't got. It can be just that they've gone. We put it to sleep. It's gone to sleep, and now it's going to heaven, or whatever your terminology. But it's addressing it.
Yeah, and I think it's not ignoring it. We shouldn't ignore it. I know when my daughter's growing up, so I used to play Final Fantasy as a kid. I don't know if you ever played Final Fantasy. It's this role-playing game. And I didn't play it a lot. There's one called Final Fantasy VII. They talked about death in that they went back to the live stream. And I like the terminology, the live stream. You know, it's a bit more easy to understand. So I used to say when we found, like, we'd find a dead bird or a dead bee, we'd bury it. And you have those questions, well, where it's gone? Now, I said to my daughter, young as she was, everyone has different beliefs. But the one that I quite like in my head is because it resonates with, you know, for energy, and we just break down and we go back into the earth. So I kind of use that, well, maybe it's gone back to the live stream, it's gone back to the earth, and all those particles and that energy is now feeding the rest of the ground. I guess it's the forest school worker in me and the counsellor in me talk about it in a different way, but she kind of got that. And at 4 years old, I think she's 4, about 5, she was still talking about death quite a lot. Death become a really big thing for her for a while. And I know that I think his in-laws were really worried that she was talking about it a lot. I said, no, it's just that's where she's at the moment. She's very interested. She's not quite. She's trying to understand the fact that something can be here and then it's not here. And what we're doing is just letting her talk about it. And I think for myself as a parent, now this is where I come personally. That's my personal view as a parent. I think that's quite good. I think to have the conversation in the best way that you can is quite important, because it's like you've said, is that eventually they're gonna come across death. There is no life without death. There's no death without life. It's
and there's no point in shutting down conversation, even if she's talking about it quite a bit. You shut that down, and then it's just all internalized anyway. And you know. I think the problem is with death as well. If you had a child that keeps talking about, my God, he's turning into a serial killer here, you know, which is infatuation with it, but it's not. It's not the case. He's just trying to understand it because it is odd.
Well, and it's in when you look at, like, I know that this isn't kind of my expertise, but I was reading a book called The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel, I think. It's a really good book, and it's really well written. You can get the parent version for it, and it tells you about brain development. And he gives an example in that book where a woman was going to counselling because the child had suffered a traumatic event. The traumatic event was they were in a car accident, and the nanny was in there, and the nanny got really injured. And this was like the carer, not like the nana, but like the nanny. It's an American book. And after that, the child was about 3, so the child had taken everything that happened. The child wasn't injured, but the nanny had to be taken to the ambulance, and the child kept on saying, I forgot the the nanny's name, we'll call her Nanny. Nanny went in the knee now, mummy. Nanny went in the knee now, mummy. And the mum for a while was quite worried, like, are they upset? And I think the psychotherapist or the counsellor or psychologist said, no, they're talking about it to understand it. Don't shut it down. Let them do it, because what's happening is they're repeating it because it's happened. It's been difficult, and they're processing it, and their brain is processing it. And instead of shutting down, the mum got, yes, yeah. Nanny went in the Nina, yeah. And Nanny went to the hospital, yeah. And Nanny came out to the hospital, and then they almost like complete the story.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and after a while, the child was fine, forgot about it, moved on. Probably an adult now and probably doesn't know anything anymore about it. But it was an interesting one where the advice was be there, be present, connect, and talk. And I think when we've got our own children, presence
Presence
is
is key.
it's a gift.
I think we're too eager to shut down conversation as well. Any conversation really, and there's no learning in shutting it down.
No, and even difficult conversations. I think we're very quick to kind of avoid what we see as hard conversations. We don't always want to go to the depth. And I think, as we were saying earlier, for some people, it's just they're not in that space. They're not there, and they're not ready to kind of work on the challenges that they've got. And that's okay, because you've got to be ready to have those connections. But I think as we move forward as a society, as civilization, I think we've got better in the last few years, 10, 20, about being more open about things that bother us. Hopefully, it will cause less anxiety in people and less kind of like those kind of more destructive behaviours when you do shut down. Because conversation's important.
But like with the counselling, because you've said a few times, and anyone who listened to the first time you're on here, how did you get into being a counsellor?
All right, so, and I think now that I understand it, it was probably kind of an existential dread. So I left high school, and I didn't do very well, is the reality, and I felt like my options were closed to me. So I was kind of didn't know where I wanted to be. I had this idea that I was going to go in the army, and then I started listening to punk music, and that changed my idea on the military. But that was my idea up until I was 14, until I got into punk. And then all of a sudden I had this whole new ideology, which changed everything for me. And my dad, who was in the army, also kind of says, well, maybe do something else. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And one of the things that I suggested is, well, get a trade. So I became a plumber. I love that fact now, because it's a lot easier to change my own taps than to ask somebody else to do it, but not necessarily at the time. And I wasn't happy. I wasn't the best plumber, if I tell you the truth. I'm still not the best plumber. But I can do enough to get by. But I wasn't happy. And, you know, the chaps that I was around, whilst they were very nice chaps, where I was at 16 was getting worse and worse and worse. I had a lot of anxiety. I was starting to feel depressed. I wasn't happy with where I was in life. That kind of led to very, very small self-harms. I've been in the loft and scratching myself with a nail or something like that. And I did try to talk to some of the chaps, and I said, I just feel depressed. And the answer that I got back quite a lot was, how can you be depressed? You are 16. Okay? Everyone has different life experiences, and I guess maybe understanding of these things. And back when I was 16, that was, 2002, 2003, so mental health wasn't as big as it wasn't as open it is now.
You have them saying, what have you got to be depressed about, or how do you don't know depression is? Well, exactly.
And I get where they're coming from to a degree. They're grown men, they've got married children, they had more going on, I guess, financially than me and stuff like that. But that was kind of the answer they got.
Yeah.
And then so over time, I had those moments. I wasn't officially diagnosed as depressed. The doctor did try and put me on tablets, but I ignored that. I didn't go for those. But I'll always say that I remember the days clearly enough, because the best part of my day was when I woke up and the wave hadn't hit me. At that point, it's why I was miserable. And so what I did is I decided to, let's regroup, let's rethink what I like being around people. I know that much. So I do want a job maybe where I'm helping people. I went to a careers advisor that suggested a lot of things, and one of them was like getting to psychology maybe. And the chance meeting with the psychology teacher at Dudley College as he was leaving his office, he says, well, it doesn't sound like you want to do psychology, because what you're saying is that you want to help people. Counselling and psychology, two separate sides of the same coin. You might want to go and look at counselling instead. I was about 18 or 19, so this is really young. And I went, okay, fine. I went and found the counselling tutors, and I managed to get myself on the counselling skills course, which actually Jennifer Lumsden Gordon from Black Country Women's Aid was helping run at the time. And then from there was this moment where they had to decide whether or not to let me on the next stage, which would have been the level 4 diploma, which would qualify me as a professional counsellor. Now, I wanted to get into counselling because whilst I was a young person, I felt maybe if young people had a young person to listen to, that might encourage them to get into counselling more. It was a double-edged sword, and I'll explain that in a minute, but a lot of conversations happened, I found it lay behind the scenes as to whether or not to let me on. Then I had to find a counselling placement for me, people would take me on, so I went and worked with a young person's organisation based 25 in Wolverhampton, who I actually currently work for 4 days a week now. And I started doing my counselling. I managed to get through to that. I look back now and I think what I was probably experiencing when I was 16 was existential crisis and existential dread. Have you ever heard of? We all get it. It's just basically when you kind of find you don't have meaning. So I managed to find meaning through, through being helping other people and doing the counselling. It turned out I really like youth work, so I went to youth work, and then I blend counselling and youth work together now. But that's what kind of got me into it, my own. And a lot of people have this, the wounded healer. No, I don't think that's always the best thing. I will say that, because if you've not dealt with your own stuff, you do run the risk of putting that onto other people if you're not aware of it. But that's why when you do your counselling course, you have clinical supervision, you have your own therapies and stuff like that. And that's what kind of led me into counselling, and then working with young people was just a series of chance meetings, wanting to help other people and wanting to go in a different direction in my life.
And it's funny how, like, most journeys are built on chance meetings, either for good or for bad.
Yeah.
You get there and you have a row.
Yeah.
You hit someone, you go to prison, or you don't hit him and you become, it's all them little, if I'd have gone there 5 minutes earlier, I'd have had a car crash.
Yeah.
And it's them chant, or, meeting that teacher. I don't think this is for you, champ, but try this.
Yeah.
And your life just goes, wow, in either which way, catastrophe or success.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you need a bit of both to get to the same place.
Yeah, and the journey, so for myself, I've not had a normal journey. I've not done the whole go to high school, go to college, go to university. I've done all that. I've done those, but I've done it in a very different route. I mean, even my qualifications, most people become a youth worker and then a counsellor later. Yeah. I've done that the opposite way around. But it's worked out really well, the chance meetings. And the reason I got into doing the outdoor stuff was, again, chance meeting. So I was starting to take my clients outside anyway. I was getting fed up of sitting in a room, and 16-year-old. I was working with I was working from 7-year-olds to 18-year-olds. So I was doing a lot of work outside with the kids I was working with. And one of the lads said to me, "Oh, let's go to my forest school today." I was in the primary school, I was doing some bereavement counselling. Oh, okay. I didn't know what a forest school was. I was all right, show him where it was. Show him where it is, lad. And we walked around. I saw this campfire, and I was like, "What's that?" He went, "Oh, that's our campfire." I was like, you can light campfires. What are we talking about?
School's changed, hasn't it, man?
I was allowed to light fires as a kid. That was probably sensible, to be fair. But I was like, okay. He says, "Yeah, we do campfires, and we get to whittle. We get to use and we do marshmallows, and we play games." I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting, man." And I've been working at school for a while, so I knew the outdoor leader. And I said to the outdoor leader, I says, "What's that you do over there?" That's forest school. And after that, I said, "I'm really getting into my whittling and stuff." And weirdly enough, at that point, I was getting into like small bushcrafting stuff. And he gave me a Moore knife, and he went, "Oh, I'll have this as well." I've passed it on to a mate since. But he told me about it, and I was like, "That's the next thing I'm going to do. I want to do that." And when chance happened, I got offered a job at another school, and I got myself on a forest school qualification. And because of that chance meeting, I did, and the chance just to work in the school, I got to do the forest school, and then I started bringing in more nature-based therapies because I've got these firelighting skills, this knowledge of the outdoors more, and then I built more on that just through doing the bushcraft. And it's all chance meetings. Nothing was straightforward.
But every takes you there, and as you say, because I've got the counselling, I've got this thing now, and you were saying off camera about the beauty of just sitting around a fire.
Yeah, so I think the thing is going more to like your nature-based therapies, the fire's great, and there's a couple of reasons why fire's great. One, show me anyone that doesn't like sitting around a fire. There's very few people, unless you've got like serious asthma or something like that. Most people actually quite enjoy sitting around a fire.
Even if it's the fire and you want to go to a gas fire, and you just watch the flickering of the flames. It's hypnosis, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I think the very fact that you kind of feed in the fire, so you're nurturing the fire. So what you'll find is, whether it's in groups or one-to-one, the fire becomes your central point. That's your central focus. If you want to get people around to talk to people, then you'll call them back round and you'll all sit around the fire. And everyone, or most people, will be drawn towards looking at the fire. And if they're not drawn looking at it, they'll want to be feeding it and things like that. And I think at that point, it kind of brings kind of like your cortisols down, your adrenaline levels down, and it just relaxes you. If it's in the autumn and winter, even better, because it'll warm you up as well, and it'll give you that really nice kind of endorphin rush, that really happy feeling. And so you can be sitting around this fire just looking at it, and then the conversation happens. It can be anything. Anything can start it, but most often you might say, oh, how are people feeling at the moment? Oh, I'm really calm. I'm really relaxed here. When I work with the adults, a lot of them say it kind of reminds me of my childhood. When I went camping and things like that. For some, it's more like it feels nice to be outside. It feels nice to be around a fire. And for the younger people that I work with, it's that sense of adventure. It's that we've done this together.
Excitement.
Excitement. We're out there. But when you're around it, the conversations can really develop quite naturally. And that, for me, fire can represent a lot of different things. It can be really good, for example, as symbolic. So I was working with a young lad not long ago, and we were working on anger, kind of trying to explain that actually anger is not a bad thing. It's not wrong to be angry. It's okay to be angry. The problem is when anger gets out of control. So we've been working together for a few weeks, and every start of every session, he lights the fire and he puts the kettle on, ready to go for the session. And I said, let's take, for example, this fire. As it stands, is it doing what we need it to? Yeah. What's it doing? Spoiling our water pot chocolate. It's great, isn't it? Great fire. Perfect. What happens if it got big and then bigger and then started to spread to places we didn't want it to go? He says, well, it would damage things, wouldn't it? And I says, well, what would it damage? He said, well, it damaged this tree. Yeah. What else might it damage? What lives in the tree? Well, it could hurt the birds. Yeah. Things on the ground, foxes. So we go through all these things damage then. So fire is kind of like anger and fire are quite similar. When your anger is controlled and it's focused, you can do things with it. We use the example, he's using history like Martin Luther King was angry, but maintained his composure and he focused that anger to spread his message. When a fire is out of control, however, we have forest fires. Well, that doesn't just hurt you, that hurts everyone around you. So when your fire is out of control, who's getting hurt? And a lot of people say, well, a lot of children say, my family, my friends, and it's because it's out of control. And I want you to imagine when you're angry in your body, the more you feed that fire, the bigger it's going to get. I want you to imagine maybe taking some sticks off it. Imagine it shrinking down to something that you can manage and you can control. So for me, that's one of the beauties of fire. Symbolism, stories, comfort. It's primal. It brings us together. Almost opens conversation for us.
And in that instance, people understand the danger of it as well, don't they?
Yeah,
in that instance. So you know, you could tell a 5-year-old the same kind of story, and they'd understand that actually if this fire gets out of control, it's gonna, do this and that.
And that's the thing. Sometimes, especially when we work with younger kids, they're not at the stage of their development where they could possibly easily understand anger in that way. We can sit down in this room and we can talk about anger because we've had the life experiences where we can reflect on and draw on to know when anger's got out of control and the impact it's had. We've got the emotional intelligence to reflect and to understand that. For young people, they're probably not quite there, especially other young people who maybe haven't had the nurturing. So we're talking about young people who have had have been lucky enough to have a good upbringing, a secure base, they're happy, they're secure, they're well fed, all of that. They're in thrive mode rather than survive mode. And they will not always understand how to manage anger. Take a young person who's in trauma, who is in survival mode, and hasn't got that emotional intelligence, well, then that's going to be hard for them as well. So using things like fire and symbols is really beneficial to getting them to understand kind of that psychoeducation, really, which is what we call there's a psychologist called Gibson who called there's affordances in any environment. And affordances is something that help us kind of make sense and understand the world. You can do that. So for your boxing gym, for example, you'll have a lot of affordances down there. For myself, an affordance can be fire. It can be a tree. It can be a rock. It can be the coal that we can use to draw. An affordance is something that allows people, it's something that you can use to help you gain more of an understanding of whatever you're talking about.
I think about my own son, and when he was growing up, he could get quite angry. He just didn't know what to do with his emotions, I think the thing it was. And I went through a stage, well, to begin with, newish parent, my eldest was good as gold, and my son comes along with all this anger and all this. I don't even know where it come from. We just couldn't really express it. But I used to fight fire with fire as well.
Yeah.
And you soon realise, well, actually, you're adding fuel. You're adding fuel to it. And sometimes you've got to stop and go, actually, this isn't working. What do we do to change? I think a lot of parents are like that, aren't they? It's kind of, because you are learning it as you go along. I definitely think I had fuel to his fire at some point.
You don't put fire out with fire, do you?
No, you don't.
I think as well, I look back on my parenting, and I even with the kind of knowledge that I've got, and it does help at times, but I'm still human first before I'm professional. I think when you're a parent, you see things through your parents' eyes as well. So there's a lot of emotion invested in our children. We love them, we care for them, we want the best for them, and that can sometimes blindside us. But one of the things that I learned is about 6-7 years ago, something called emotion coaching. Ever heard of that? That's a really good one, that is. And I like it because it's just easy to understand. It just clears the decks of all the jargon. And emotion coaching essentially is you helping your children to understand what's going on and their emotions. But what they say first, you're talking about fire, they say, imagine, again, it's quite grim, but you're going down in an aeroplane, the masks drop on. They always say, put your mask on before you put the child's mask on, because if you don't, then you could end up passing out, and you both end up passing out. It's the same with emotion coaching. They always say, if you want to regulate, so you've got here your child, let's say, I'm going to use my hands, they're in a state of dysregulation, yeah? If you come along and you're dysregulated, you're both like that, and you're going to be grappling. But if you come in, they're in a state of dysregulation, you're in a state of regulation, you can get them to calm down, then you can begin to co-regulate. But what happens when a lot of people don't kind of, if you haven't got, if you've not been exposed to this sort of kind of theories, is you imagine the brain. It's another dance I got one. It's really good for the parents, but you've got your brain here. This is a thing that connects to your spine and stuff like that. You've got kind of your, what they call your lizard brain, your mammalian brain, all things that help you breathe and live through life, the basics. And then we've got this prefrontal cortex here, which makes us human. But over time, under stress and with enough adrenaline, you imagine this is a bit like a pin. Eventually, when they say they call it, you'll flip your lid, all that thought process goes out. rationality, calm. And what happens is when people are angry with that, lid flips and they're just in anger zone. And one of the kind of things with motion coaches is let them come down, let them calm down and relax before you try to change the situation. And I can give you another example. I was working with a lad. He'd been going through a lot of stuff, this lad had. And I walked into the primary school one day and the receptionist is signing me in, and all of a sudden above me, Luke, quick, come up here. He's really angry. He's throwing everything. I walk up the stairs. There's 5 adults outside this room, and this lad is in the room and he's throwing chair after chair. I walked into the room. I sat down out the way. I gave him maybe a minute. He looked at me and I went, "We calm now?" And he went, "Yeah." I went, "Shall we put the chairs back?" "Yeah, we put the chairs back." "Okay. What happened?" Then it transpired someone had said something to him that had really upset him. He comes back into the room, everyone comes around the table, and it's just a little lad, he's just holding a pen, he's just messing, drawing. One of the staff turned around and said, "Are you not listening to me?" He goes up again. So calm him down again. And then later, they said, "Oh, what happened now?" I says, "We didn't need to acknowledge that. He was messing with a pen. It was irrelevant. He was stressed. We're doing a meeting about him and his life. We can let him have the pen for a bit."
Yeah.
And I think what I was trying to explain to him at the time is that it's not his behaviour is the result of what he's going through, not because everything's hunky-dory in his life. And we need to acknowledge that and work with that.
And messing with a pen, it's not the end all of it all, is it? You're thinking...
You're just throwing chairs around the room.
So it's like fire, lighter, you know, an inferno or someone, and you're thinking,
yeah,
if that little bit of play, mind distraction, focusing on twiddling a pen or a penny for your finger, is it the end of the world? And I think we've all seen that, like sometimes anyone who had a child through lockdown, we weren't always the best parent.
No.
We had glimmers of being a great parent.
Yeah.
The longer it went on, and sometimes because your emotional bucket was so full, one extra drop and you wouldn't be. But on those days where you could go, "Baby, we're both stressed. Daddy's a bit stressed, you're a bit stressed," and have a cuddle, the fire went down a lot quicker, didn't it?
Yeah.
But when you're blurting it, "For God's sake, put your toys away." You're all just shouting and crying. But then it's acknowledging it and going, "Daddy had a wobble," or "Mommy had a wobble," or "Nanny had a wobble." Address it. No one's perfect. Then we're on a journey together, aren't we?
You're teaching.
You're teaching.
Yeah, it's
Not
it's a
even
social
Daddy's
pedagogy.
perfect.
No, it's not, and I think that's the thing. I think, and also when you're acknowledging that with your child, they can feel a bit happier in the fact that you've acknowledged that your reaction, and you're teaching that then, because that's going to be a lesson for them that, you know, they're going to make mistakes. They're not, but they've got to own up to it. They've got to accept that.
We're family here. We don't lie to each other. And if one of us has made the other one sad, let's say sorry. Let's acknowledge that we've hurt the other person's feelings. And isn't that a wonderful yet lost art in nowadays? I've dropped a clanger.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It won't happen again. And if it does happen again, it's my fault.
Yeah.
We've lost that, haven't we?
Yeah, I think the thing is there's sometimes this idea that you shouldn't. I think maybe it comes from maybe our parents' generation, stuff like that. We shouldn't acknowledge fault, but the issue with that is, and this is where I come from when I look at my parents. My dad was quite good at that. Actually, he's quite good. You know, he could flip his lid. Worked in a stressful job and stuff like that, but he was very good at acknowledging when he'd done something wrong. And I know people who have parents who never acknowledge when they've done something wrong, and the impact they can have, and that can impact your relationship with your child. Because if you're not willing to share with them that you've done wrong, you're missing moments of connection as well. I mean, we all hope that we'd be the best parents, but that's not the case. It's not going to happen. And I think one of the sayings that I heard, that most parents, not every parent, even if you're very worst, you'll be good enough. I would kind of change that. I would change, if you're a present parent and you care about your kids, and you give them that solid foundation, that secure foundation, that good attachment, then at your very worst, you'll be good enough. Because that's the key to parenting, that secure base. And we talk about that in attachment theory. And to make it more simple, the secure base is, imagine you have a child and they're sitting on a 3-legged wobbly rickety chair surrounded by sharp objects, and you say to that child, I want you to learn this mathematical equation. They are never going to do it because they're going to be so focused on falling over and getting hurt, but that's not going to happen. Give them a secure base, a 4-legged, well-structured, comfortable wooden chair, and then say, learn this mathematical equation. Of course, they're going to be like, oh, okay, because it's a secure base. And secure bases are one of the keys to good parenting. When a child knows that their base is secure and they can come to their parents and they can trust their parents, then their options to explore the wider world safely is also there. And I think it's interesting because we learn so much at school that's not relevant in real life. We don't learn about parenting, yet most of us will be parents. If we're lucky.
But we should, in a good environment, learn that from home. But if we haven't got that, it's hard to teach something that you know nothing about.
Yeah, it is. And I think my experience of being a parent, it's all learning it now. It's learning that in that moment sort of thing.
Learn it on the job.
Yeah. Even if you've got loads of background in it, if you've got knowledge in it, it doesn't always translate. That book knowledge
every
doesn't
child's
translate.
different, so it's how do you kind of teach it?
And you're different to every child.
Well, exactly. I've got 3, and they're all totally different. There's no.
But as you have a child,
And we've had to adapt to them in the way we teach them.
Yeah, and as you have a child, you're slightly different yourself. You're a little bit
God,
older, a little
definitely.
bit wise, a little bit better off, worse off, and and so that not only every child is different, we're a bit different to that child,
And so you should be.
and you should do.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Is that I remember when my child was just born. I was in a band. And I was one of the lads there. Also had no, it was before she was born. My wife was heavily pregnant, but the one chap had a recent newborn, and I said, "You got any advice?" And he went, I'm not saying this is not the right to do it, but he says, don't read too much into the books, and don't read too much into this stage I should be here. And he gave me a really kind of good example. It was one of his friends, his partner was reading all the books and was saying that at this stage they should be able to do this. And it was something about hearing, and their daughter just was never responding to her. She was every time. So the chap got home and she was in absolute floods of tears. Inconsolable, saying she's deaf. I know she's deaf because she's not been responding to me all day. Obviously, very concerned mother. So the chap, he goes into the kitchen to get a glass of water and he's shaking. Drops the glass, it smashes. Baby looks up. It's just like one of those moments. Like the baby just wasn't responding to the cues for whatever reason. And the books can be really good, but at the same time, it's like everything, isn't it? You can have too much of a good thing, and instead of just being there and connected and going with that flow, sometimes I think we hang ourselves up on, to be a good parent, I must meet this criteria and this criteria.
It's almost, there's no manual for life, so how can you have a manual for a baby? There's no.
No, and it's, and I think that's it. And I think one of the things that, for me, trying to be a good dad, I always think about kind of the good stuff that my own parents showed me. What were they good at? What did I enjoy from that parenting, and trying to pass that on, sort of thing. And then looking at what didn't I like, what wasn't so great, because there's going to be stuff that I'm not good at as well. There's stuff that they weren't good at. Okay, so how do I change that? And I think that's the best thing we can do, is take the best of what we learned and improve on the stuff. Well, maybe we would have liked more of this or more of that sort of thing. But no parent's perfect, and for me, I what I will say, and talking about lockdown, I spent a lot of time walking with my daughter. We did a lot of walks together, and I found that walking together was a really good way of getting to know more, and was doing like kind of their outdoor learning stuff like that anyway. But I find walking with your child is really good. We did Snowdon last summer, just me and her. She was 7.5, and yeah, Snowdon's a really long climb for anyone. It's a very long climb if you got a 7-year-old with you
Nice
as well.
and steep.
Yeah, we did the peak track as well. So yeah, we did the shortest but hardest track. But it was a great day because a lot of the stuff that we were doing, we were talking. Because guess what? There's no signal there, so no phones, no distraction, nothing like that. So we spent the whole day talking. She was telling me about school, who she liked, who she didn't like, and there was that just like nice connection. Then because we did this together. We've got that nice memory together of getting up to the top of Snowdon, how hard it was. And for herself, she had to kind of learn that resiliency, that it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be a walk in the park because we were climbing the mountain sort of thing. So together, doing that sort of stuff was really good. And I always try to go back to, for fatherhood, is having that time together. And again, because of my job, we've just spent a lot of time outdoors. We spent a lot of time camping. I brought her first knife when she was 3, so she spent a lot of time whittling. She's got her own fire kit. So a lot of the stuff that I do in my professional life, I do in my personal life as well. So that's how much I believe in it. I believe it works. So I do it for just as much for my child as I do for other people's.
Because you're just saying about doing a walk. You're doing another walk for charity, aren't you? Do you want to say who it's for and where it is and how people can donate?
Yeah, so I'm doing the Welsh Three Peaks this weekend for the Haven charity in Wolverhampton. The Haven charity is a charity that supports children and women fleeing domestic abuse. They have some wonderful services. They have children's services. They have adult advice services. And they've been going for 50 years. This year's their 50th anniversary. I'm climbing the Welsh Three Peaks in 24 hours. So that's Penny Fan, Kadir Idris and Snowdon for them. And if they want to donate, if you find my Facebook page, my Instagram pages, there's going to be links on there. I'm going to put another one up shortly to donate for that. But that's a really good cause.
How can they find you on social media?
So if you go on social media, if you just click Google Wild and Well Outdoors, or go on Instagram, put Wild letter N Well Outdoors, you'll see a symbol, which is this symbol, which has fire, 2 axes on the side of it, trees and a heart. You'll find that symbol, and that's the best way to get to me, sort of thing, and what I do anyway. But yeah, it's this weekend, nice.
Brilliant, well, good luck for it. Well, I've really enjoyed tonight, Luke.
No, thank you.
Is there anything else you want to say before?
I think for myself, it's like say, for myself is if you're gonna find joy in the outdoors, it doesn't need to be in mountain ranges. It doesn't need to be going on a plane, going abroad. I do a lot of what I do through micro adventure approaches, which means that if you're in, obviously, Black Country lads, built as Black Country, you can find green spaces and transform that into a sense of adventure, which allows connection with the natural world and with others as well. So I'd say don't fall into the trap of thinking wild adventure means going to massive wilderness places. It can be any green space, and I'd encourage people to get out and do it.
We did say off camera, and if you are going to go up to Snowdon, if you are going to be safe, make sure you don't necessarily
prepared, I think.
be prepared. Do you know what I mean? Don't just go in your flip-flops and shorts with no water, with no phone. Let people know you're going, because accidents can happen, to make sure that you're safe and people know where you are.
And also, one of the things I always say is, if you ever go into these places for the first time, go find someone who's done it before. It honestly does make the experience a lot better. I've got a friend who's done so many mountains in the UK that we've done mountains where he's not done, we've done it together. But if you go in, especially to a place like Snowdon, doing that, if you go with somebody who's done it before, it does make the first time a lot better, because they know the paths as well.
Well, Luke, have you got any quotes or sayings that have helped you get through life?
Yeah, do you know what? And for myself, if I go back to kind of like the outdoors, stuff like that, I don't know if it's Ben Vogel, but I think it was him who said it. I think I heard it off him. It's hard to love something that you can't name. So if you want to get connected to things, learn. more about them.
Well, guys, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Luke, for coming on.
Thank you.
So until we all see each other next time, I want you all to take care of yourselves and each other. Ta-ra a bit.
Listen.
And that's a wrap for another show. But if there are any comments or messages that you would like us to read out for our next podcast, please be in touch. There are also lots of different organisations at the bottom of this page, and hopefully they can help you or someone you care about. Please share this to spread the word. Until we talk next time, ta-ra a bit.